Hi, so it's very common for a person to call us up and say, look, I know what I must do, but I just don't do it. So an example is, I know I shouldn't smoke, but I smoke. Or I know I should eat a certain way to lose weight, but I don't eat that way. You know, that type of thing. I know what I must do, but I just don't do it. So this particular expression is more common among people who have engaged in the past in what we call conventional therapy, which is like cognitive, just talking about the rational part of the mind, which we think is harmful for the most part. And of course, I'm dealing with a population that is very different from the entire population. I'm dealing with people who seek other forms of changing themselves, particularly using altered states of consciousness. So among those people, those who have previously engaged in rational only talk therapy, they end up becoming very resistant to change because they become experts in their own problems. But the important thing here is this. What do you make of this statement? I know what I must do, but I just don't do it. If you think of this in terms of like in biblical terms, right? You think of the word rebellion. But the word rebellion is very difficult to apply the word to ourselves. We can easily apply the word to this theological idea of fallen angels rebelling against God. We can easily apply the word rebellion to children who won't listen to their parents or teachers. But it's very difficult to apply the word to ourselves. And yet, if you go by the definition of it, if you think of a person saying, I know what I must do, but I just don't do it, I guess the word rebellion or rebellious does apply to the person, to all of us, really, because we all know more than we actually practice, right? So here's the thing. Let's do an exercise. Regardless of what you choose to call this phenomenon, let's do an exercise. Let's imagine right now that we're watching some children play. They're in some sort of playground and they're all playing around. Now watch these children really carefully. What is directing them? In other words, if they go up into the monkey bars, or if they throw some sand, or if they throw a pebble into the pond, or when they're playing around, what is guiding them? And if you pay attention, they're not thinking of what they should do, and they're not thinking of what they must do. They're actually doing what feels good to them. There's a certain amount of curiosity, they're exploring the world, but they're being driven by what feels good, right? And what feels good is what we call pleasure or pleasant. So what do we call adults, rational people? What do we call being guided by pleasure as opposed to by duty, for instance? Some people are guided by their duty, honor. In other words, we're guided by different principles. When we're guided by the pleasure principle, we call that hedonism. So in modern times, the word hedonist or hedonism is associated with like some sort of perversion. Oh, this guy's a hedonist. He's just at the beach all day, drinking beer. And that's not really what it is. Hedonism in the philosophical sense is allowing your actions to be guided by what feels good to you. It actually feels good to you, which is the way children function. So when you look at an adult, one of us, saying to ourselves, well, I know what I must do, I know what I should do, where did that should or must come from? They didn't start off that way, because when that person was in the play yard, in the playground, they weren't being guided, they weren't doing what they were doing because they must do it, they were doing what felt good to them. So when did we switch from doing what feels good to doing what we must do? And if you think about it, it's when we discovered authority. Think about this for a second. So here you are in the playground, throwing the sand, throwing the pebble, because it feels good to you. You're having fun doing that, and you're laughing and running around until somebody comes along and says, don't do this. And they impose their authority. They put you in timeout. They scream at you, perhaps, or they tell you how you should play or what you should do. So when we first encounter authority, something happens within us. In other words, babies, when they're born, they encounter authority. In other words, the doctor is in the hospital where they were born is the authority, the medical authority, whatever, no, but they're not aware of it, right? So this, what I mean by when they first encounter authority is when we first become aware of the existence of such thing as authority. In other words, this other person has power over me. They can actually pick up my body and put it over here. They have authority over me. They can inflict physical pain upon my body. They can actually deprive me of the activities that I like to engage in. In other words, we become aware of authority. So one of the things will happen at that point. Either we're going to discover authority in a just form or in an unjust form. Sorry, in an unjust form. In other words, if we encounter authority for the first time as children and it feels fair to us, the person explains it to us and we kind of buy into it and we feel that it's a fair deal, we're kind of happy to oblige and engage in what people call order, right? But if it feels unfair to us, and let's face it, you and I, just you and I, nobody else will find out, 99.9% of all authority is unjust. People impose their will on you. Think back to your own life. People are always imposing their will on you, particularly when we're young and small. Adults feel entitled. People talk about this all the time. They say, I own you, I made you, I gave you life. Parents talk this way all the time. There's adults feel entitled to impose their authority upon us because we're physically small as children. So when the child detects that authority is an unfair thing, an unjust thing, we begin to resent it. When we resent someone or something, that something gets into us. Think of resentment as an open gate. The moment I resent, that thing gets into me. It's like a virus. We become infected with that. In other words, we become the unfair authority ourselves, onto ourselves. And the person grows up and says, yeah, I know what I must do, but I just don't do it. And they go into a war within themselves, against themselves, and they suffer as a result. That person is at war with themselves. So you might say, oh, dude, I don't buy this explanation. You're just like making this up, whatever. And that's okay. It doesn't matter if you buy the explanation or not. The point is what to do about it. This is just a story I told you. For some of you, it might sound really interesting. For some of you, it's like, well, really, it's not quite like that. Well, it kind of is like that, even if you tell the story a little differently. The point is that we encounter authority for the first time. If we find it to be unjust, we resent it. The moment we resent it, we become infected by the identity of that person. And the identity of that person we perceive as being negative to us. We don't like their authority, and therefore we do the same thing to ourselves. Freud talked about this all the time. We call this compulsion to repeat. We do it to ourselves what others did to us that we didn't like. This is, you would think, right? You would think that if somebody does something to me that I don't like, I will get the point and never do that to anybody else. Well, it gets worse than that. If somebody does something to me that I don't like and I resent that person, the tendency is for me to do the same thing to myself. Compulsion to repeat. And to others as well, but worse, to ourselves. So when we resent, early on in our lives, unfair authority, we kind of adopt the identity of that person, and we do the same thing to ourselves. And this is why people come here. I've been doing this for 21 years. People come here and they're suffering. In some cases, they're mutilating their bodies through a whole bunch of unneeded surgeries, and they're in trouble, and they're in health problems and in relationship problems, and their lives are horrible. And all it is that they're at war with themselves, deep within themselves. They're at war with this authority that they don't quite understand. So we can talk about this until whatever, forever. Cognitively, we can talk about this and we can become experts on your problem and where it came from. And you know what's going to change? I'm sorry to tell you, nothing is going to change, because that war is actually happening at a level of your awareness that is below your conscious awareness. It's subconscious. And that's why you have to go into the subconscious. And a lot of therapists, they're afraid of doing this. And I hear this all the time. They say, oh, that's kind of dangerous, because the patient might be decompensated. They're afraid of it. Why? Because they're afraid of their own unconscious. So we've been doing this for many, 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 many years, and people are living wonderful lives. And not just us, all over the world for 3,000 years. If there was any danger to this, somebody would have already raised their hands and said, excuse me, I don't think that's a good idea, right? It isn't so. It's a great idea, and people are becoming liberated, discovering awesome lives when they liberate themselves from this war that they live within. Unjust authority. We kind of incorporate that. Think of a virus, a computer virus. We open ourselves up through resentment, we adopt that identity, and from there on the war is inside, and we make a living hell out of our own lives, and oftentimes damage our own health in the process. I'm here to invite you to reconsider. Reconsider what's going on in your life. Stop If you're not driving, stop what you're doing, close your eyes. If you're not driving a car right now or operating the machinery, stop whatever you're doing, turn this video off for a moment, close your eyes, think about what's going on in your life very deeply, and ask yourself, is this really you? Ask yourself, is this me? You didn't start off that way. Think of yourself at 2, 3, 4 years of age in a playground. You were not that way. Something happened along the way, didn't it? Isn't that true? Something kind of changed along the way. You weren't like that in the beginning. What happened? Well, I'm telling you what happened. Our job is to help you forgive. When we talk about forgiveness, people say, oh yeah, I know what you mean. I got to forgive my dad. I got to forgive my mom. I got to forgive my teacher. Yeah, I think we should. I think that would be good for us to forgive them. But that's not what I'm talking about. We got to do something a lot harder than that, but a lot more fruitful. We got to learn to forgive ourselves. Not easy. Easy in concept, but not so easy to actually do. I can help you do just that. And in so doing, I'll help you change your mind about yourself. And in so doing, you can become once again who you truly are. And this is why we say a new you awaits within. The real you awaits within. So if this sounds like a good idea to you and you want to talk some more about it, let me know. Give me a call, send me an email. We'll talk more about this. We'll see if there's a right fit there, if what I have to offer you is the right fit for you, if it's a good idea for you, and perhaps we can help you achieve the same, all right? Like thousands of other people who have come here have achieved. Well, I'm looking forward to meeting you. Let me know. Thank you and blessings.